becomes sort of influential. So this year, we had Rahu conjunct with Saturn all year long. They're in the same sign, which was Libra. And Saturn has his own difficulties too. He's the planet that takes about 28, 29 years to get around the sun. And so he moves slow, about 2.5 years in each sign. And so it's significant wherever Saturn might be sitting. He makes an impact. And ultimately, Saturn is the planet of karma and truth, and he teaches us detachment. And when you're on board with Saturn's lessons, life can sometimes go a little bit better, but he can still cause some trouble. But really, he wants you to understand karma, and he wants you to understand responsibility and detachment, and again, sort of more on the side of Ketu, the liberation planet a little bit. It's a very spiritual force. It's sort of the planet that pushes you into spirituality, whether you want to or not. So if you put those two together, Rahu and Saturn, it's kind of a sort of confusing message. One of them is this sort of hungry, worldly, demon head guy, and the other one is this sort of slow-moving, detached, older fellow who just wants truth. He wants to expose this whole Maya thing. He wants you to see that there's more to it than this stuff and these desires and things like that. So anyway, they are two very intense forces astrologically. And all year they've been occupying one space. And so I think that's why it's been a hard year for a lot of, or 2013 had been a hard year for a lot of people. So Saturn stays in a place for 2.5 years. Rahu and Ketu, they stay in a sign for about 1.5 years. So it just so happens that the whole time Rahu has been in the sign of Libra, so has Saturn. So it's a 1.5 year conjunction. So that started in January of 2013. And I know there's always natural disasters and there's always problems economically and things like that, but it seemed like it was sort of more in 2013. Do you agree? I mean, does anybody else think? Anybody notice? Yeah. So, anyway, that will continue for a little while in 2014. Saturn is still going to be in Libra until November 2nd, and Rahu will be in Libra until, I think it's June, or whatever. I have my notes here, because I can't remember everything. It's July 12th, I think, that he moves. Yes, July 12th. And Rahu doesn't move also. Ketu and Rahu both move, because they're an axis, really. So when they change, it's like the whole thing sort of shifts a little bit. So one of the great things, though, that during this sort of difficult transit was Jupiter. And so Jupiter, he takes about 12 years to get around the sun. That means, because there's 12 signs, he's going to stay in a sign for 1 year. And Jupiter in Sanskrit we call Guru. So he's the teacher. This is a very auspicious planet. He wants us to expand and seek knowledge and seek teachers and teach and get ourselves involved in higher wisdom. And generally, he can make things grow and make people joyful. And it's a positive thing. He's a positive force. And so Jupiter happened to be in Gemini, or it still is, even to this moment, in the sign of Gemini. So we had Saturn and Rahu in Libra, and we had Jupiter in Gemini. Both of those are air signs. And Jupiter, wherever he is, has the ability to sort of look at all of the other air signs. He can cast his influence on the other air signs. So that's maybe what kept our world from completely falling apart. This last year, it was nice to have Jupiter, at least, you know, even with the difficulties that might have been stirred up through the Saturn and Rahu conjunction, at least Jupiter was there, you know, keeping his eye on things. That was good. And it's still that way. I mean, even this very moment. So, but things are going to shift this year, little by little, one after the other. So, Jupiter is going to change signs in June. June 18th is when he changes. And so what that's going to do is Jupiter's going to move into the sign of Cancer, and nobody's going to have their eye on Saturn and Rahu for a little while. Just a short time, because actually Rahu will move less than a month later. So for a few weeks in June 18th and July 12th, we're going to have a time when Rahu sort of, and the Rahu-Saturn combination actually isn't being watched by Jupiter. So, you know, I have my eye on that time. Wonder what will happen during that time. Maybe something will slip, maybe whatever's being stirred up by the Saturn and Rahu conjunction will surface at that time. It'll be, and you know what, the Saturn, it doesn't worry me too much. It's the Saturn and Rahu together. So what I've been saying all this last year is that Rahu can stir things up, and he creates chaos. And in our lives, it can feel like, why are these things happening to me when I don't deserve it? What did I do to deserve these crazy things that are happening? I've done everything right, you know. And sometimes the influences of Rahu are like, they are out of your control. And they are like, your town, you know, a big rainstorm comes, flash floods, and your house is wiped out, or some sort of plague comes to your village and makes everybody sick, or things like that, you know, like outside world, the world kind of gets you, and you can't really, no matter what you do, no matter how many mantras you do, you can't really get out of it. It's just going to happen to you because you need to experience that karma. And ultimately you get that sense that I'm not in control of this show here. And actually Saturn teaches a similar lesson. He gives you the same sort of, you get the same thing in the end, but he does it in a much more controlled and disciplined manner. So usually by pressure, you get pressure, or he'll take things away from you until you humbly bow and say, I surrender, I'm sorry. You know, so anyway, Rahu and Saturn together have been kind of creating this like pressure combined with chaos. It stirs things up. And you know, and collectively we see things like floods and economic crisis and things like that. But in our lives, in each person's life, it might manifest differently depending on where those two planets may happen to be in your own personal chart. So, you know, if they're in a chart if they're in your chart that reflects your health, you could be facing a health crisis or something like that, you know. So each individual is going to have a little bit of a different experience with these transits, but you know, I'm talking the general overall. I mean, pressure plus chaos brings a lot of interesting things. But at least Jupiter was there, you know. It's like even through those tough lessons, we get the grace of the guru. We get the grace of the learning and the wisdom. We get something positive out of it in the end. So that's good. And it's nice, really. And let's say Rahu wasn't there and it was just Jupiter and Saturn, it wouldn't be quite so chaotic. It would be a little push, a little pull, a little give, a little take. We learn something, no problem. It's the Rahu addition to the recipe that makes it a little bit more crazy. So anyway, Rahu's going to be moving. Jupiter's going to be moving out of that position and moving into into the sign of Cancer in June. Which we think, oh no, he's not going to be watching anymore. However, Jupiter does really well in Cancer. It's his favorite sign. He's exalted in that sign, so that's a good thing. Jupiter will do well there. And then, so there will be that few-week period where nobody's watching Saturn and Rahu. But then Rahu is actually going to move. And the other thing about Rahu and Ketu is they move in the opposite direction from all the other planets. They move backwards. Sort of churning things, stirring things up. So Rahu's going to move into the sign of Virgo. And so anybody who has any kind of big placements in Virgo in their chart might want to keep an eye on Rahu. It's moving into your territory. So that'll alleviate some of the pressure from the Saturn-Rahu conjunction, which is nice. And really that period of time is only a few weeks, so it'll be interesting to see if anything kind of big happens during that time. Let's see. So in a big sense, we've got Rahu moving away and Jupiter moving. So an interesting thing is that when Rahu and Ketu move, so they're always opposite. They're in opposite signs. So the opposite sign from Virgo is Pisces. So Ketu will be moving into Pisces, which is actually a very spiritual sign, and Ketu is a very spiritual planet. So I'm looking forward to that aspect of things. I think that will really promote our spiritual work and growth, and so we've got that going for us. And with Jupiter having moved into Cancer, and Jupiter having the ability to look at all of the other signs of the same element, Pisces happens to also be water, just like Cancer. So Jupiter's gaze moves from Rahu to Ketu when Rahu and Ketu move. So that could be extremely expansive and great for spiritual work. So I'm really looking forward to that side of things. And then Saturn will stay, he's been in Libra for a while, since November of 11, and it takes about 2.5 or so average years to get through a sign. So we're going to see Saturn moving this year too. At the end of the year, in November 2nd, Saturn's going to move into Scorpio, so which is also a water sign. So actually Saturn will move back under the influence of Jupiter again. So there will be that time between June and November where Saturn is kind of on his own. But then he moves back into getting the influence of Jupiter, which is very positive. Interestingly enough, during that time when, between June and November, Saturn actually turns the tables. That's going to be turned around because Saturn can aspect 10 signs from himself. So when Jupiter moves into Cancer, he's actually moving into getting affected by Saturn. So that could mean that, so Jupiter rules growth, essentially. It's growth and expansion. So it could be that when Saturn starts looking at Jupiter for that period of time between June and November, that we might feel a little bit of a contraction as far as wherever it is that we're growing might feel like it suddenly stops. And we might find some obstacles in our way, and the economy, maybe the economy will be affected a little bit